edit.
Hello and welcome to WION Live broadcast from New York City. I'm Susan Tehrani, and these are this hour's headlines. Speaking at the ongoing G20 finance ministers meeting, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says the global economy is in a better shape than predicted months after the pandemic and the war in Ukraine. All 5 rescued so far confirmed dead as operations continue to pull out people from the collapsed open pit mine in China's Inner Mongolia region. At least 48 people still reported missing. In Africa, the death toll in clashes between Somalian security forces and rebels in the Somali region is now up to 96, with over 500 people wounded. The latest of several rounds of violence has now gone on for nearly 3 weeks. All lanes on the Russia-Crimea bridge damaged in a blast last year reopened. The reopening coincides with the Defender of the Fatherland Day celebrations in Russia and a day before the 1-year anniversary of the Ukraine war. Google rolls out new tests to block access to news content for some of its Canadian users, action in line with its response to the government's online news bill that forces big tech to pay news publishers for their content. A meeting of finance ministers of G20 countries is set to get underway in Bengaluru tomorrow. Ahead of the meeting, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, who is in the city, stressed greater aid for Ukraine and a global economy recovering from a series of blows. Yellen said it was critical for the International Monetary Fund to move swiftly towards a fully financed loan program for Ukraine. Ukraine seeks $15 billion multi-year funding from the IMF. In December, U.S. Congress approved an aid that included a new $45 billion package of emergency military and other assistance to the war-torn country.
As President Biden has said, we will stand with Ukraine in its fight for as long as it takes. We commend our allies for stepping up their direct assistance, and we believe it's critical that the IMF move swiftly toward a fully financed program for Ukraine, as they've said that they will do. Continued robust support for Ukraine will be a major topic of discussion during my time here in India.
While commenting on the state of the global economy, Yellen said that it's in a better place today than many predicted just a few months ago, as the spillover of the Ukraine war raised concerns of slow growth. However, she also said that it's important for G20 finance chiefs to keep working to ease inflation, saying price caps by Western countries on Russian crude oil exports are helping stabilize global energy prices. The U.S. Treasury Secretary also said that the United States is looking forward to resuming talks with China on economic issues at an appropriate time, as Washington continues to warn Beijing of the consequences of violating U.S. sanctions on Russia. Earlier today, Yellen met Indian Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman. The two leaders discussed issues relating to crypto assets, strengthening multilateral development banks, and global debt vulnerabilities. According to the Indian Finance Ministry, both sides also acknowledged the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic and the need to enhance preparedness for future pandemic-type shocks. Well, for more on this, we are joined by Raymond E. Vickery Jr., Senior Associate at Wadhwani Chair in U.S.-India Policy Studies and former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce, Trade Development, and advisor on U.S.-India relations. He's joining us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for joining us on WION. Well, ahead of the G20 finance ministers meeting, Janet Yellen, the U.S. Treasury Secretary, is speaking of a global economic situation being far better than what was feared and expected in the backdrop of the Ukraine war. I'd love to hear your reaction on that. And are things really better, or is this the calm before the storm?
Well, thanks very much for having me. I think this is a very important time to be discussing this subject. India really stands at the crossroads of being able to bring back prosperity and stability to the world. Not only is it president of the G20 this year, it's also president of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. It's had initiatives in North-South. So India is really crucial in all this. That having been said, it is encouraging that there are signs that the economy is worldwide is not as bad as had been predicted after the invasion of Ukraine and bellicose statements from China. I think the important thing to understand here is that while we've gotten some relief in terms of growth, the United States has done better than expected on jobs. India is expected to be a very fast-growing economy this year. That economic and security matters are deeply, deeply intertwined. And it is not possible for the world to go forward and achieve the prosperity that it should have and have an ongoing war in Ukraine, to have the possibility of China trying to take over additional territory, whether it be from India or in the South China Sea. These things are very much related. So I would say the jury is out in terms of where we're going to go with the economy, and that makes this meeting in Bengaluru today even more important. And hopefully India will step up and provide the kind of leadership both on the security and economic side that it's capable of.
Mr. Assistant Secretary, much has been said of the new geopolitical realignments, the U.S.-China tussle, and even things coming close to pushing the nuclear button. What are your thoughts on the possibilities of even a third world war emerging out of the Ukraine conflict? I know you mentioned that geopolitics is very aligned and related to issues regarding the economy.
Well, I think we're in a very difficult and dangerous time. If you look up the history in terms of the lead-in to World War II, there are too many similarities to the present situation. The difference is, instead of it being Nazi Germany, it is in Russia invading its neighbors and saying that it is entitled to have zones of comfort, and whether it be in the Baltic. Unfortunately, this kind of thinking is a reversion to the old imperialistic kind of approach to international affairs. That whether it be China saying it has a sphere of interest that includes Arunachal Pradesh, whether it be Russia saying that in Ukraine, the Ukraine is a part of Russia, which it is not. Those are very similar kinds of situations. So I don't think you can discount that. And I'm glad you brought up the nuclear situation. Everybody seems to think that, well, nuclear weapons will not be used, people will saber rattle, and it won't happen. The reality is that these things can happen, whether by mistake or design or just the impetus on expanding territorial control. We've got to get out of that kind of thinking. India and the U.S. have worked together in the past on international matters, including nuclear matters. We had the civil nuclear agreement between U.S. and India. And it is not a time to just dismiss these possibilities out of hand. In fact, we need to redouble our efforts. The recent action of Russia saying that on the New START treaty that is basically is pulling out, going not to allow any inspections, and without inspections, you really don't have any method of enforcement, is very, very troubling. India is now a de facto nuclear power. It has been recognized as such. The United States has made great efforts to try to get India into all of the basic nuclear control organizations. India and the United States need to work together and to completely take seriously this problem of what happens with nuclear weapons. Peace is not something that comes automatically. It has to be waged, and the U.S. and India need to work together on that.
Mr. Raymond Vickery, Jr., thank you so much for joining us on WION, and we do look forward in speaking to you very soon once again.
Thank you.
The Russia-Ukraine war will mark its one-year anniversary tomorrow. Where is the war headed? Where do things stand as of now with non-stop aggression and more divisions? We earlier told you about President Biden's visit to Kyiv, where he assured continuous Western support to Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin vowed victory. Experts say Russia and Ukraine are preparing for offensive, which could potentially turn the tides of the war for the worse. In recent week, Russia has intensified its push to fully capture Ukraine's eastern region of Donbass. And to counter this, the Ukrainian armed forces are now waiting for battle tanks and other new weapons pledged by the West.
What we're already, seeing here is that the Russians are digging in for the long haul. They have no intention of losing, depending on what their definition of, winning is at this particular stage. And Ukraine cannot afford to have Russia basically annex its territory.
Meanwhile, Putin has declared that Russia will continue to focus on advanced technology. He also added that they will begin mass deliveries of Zircon Sea-launched hypersonic missiles. The UN General Assembly convened an emergency special session on Wednesday in an effort to adopt a resolution urging Russia to halt its offensive activities in Ukraine. The high-level meeting comes before the first anniversary of Russia's invasion. Speaking at the session, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres stressed that the war is having a dramatic humanitarian and human rights consequences that extends beyond Ukraine's borders. The United Nations General Assembly is set to vote on adopting a resolution on Thursday, stressing on the need to reach a lasting peace as soon as possible, consistent with the UN Charter. Ukraine, meanwhile, has reached out to India for support ahead of the vote on the Ukraine peace resolution. After a U.S. court ruled that victims of the 9/11 attack cannot seize the $3.5 billion in frozen funds belonging to Afghanistan's central bank, Taliban have demanded that Washington return the assets to the country. On Wednesday, a federal judge in New York ruled that it was unconstitutional to allow the victims to claim those assets because doing so would amount to recognizing the Taliban as Afghanistan's legitimate government. The judge also said that since the Afghan central bank is a foreign government entity, it lacks jurisdiction under federal law to act against the bank. Reports said the families would appeal the ruling. The Taliban authorities welcomed the court ruling and demanded that the U.S. should return the assets. There was about $7 billion in Afghan central bank funds deposited at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York when Taliban seized control of Kabul in 2021. The United States took control of the assets soon after the Taliban takeover, and last February, U.S. President Joe Biden froze the funds, reserving about half to be spent on helping the Afghan people while leaving the remaining $3.5 billion for the 9/11 families to keep going after in the courts. Seems like the winter doesn't end here in the United States. A major winter storm in northern United States has left 3,500 flights grounded and multiple interstate highways closed. Chicago's O'Hare Airport and Denver International Airport were among the major airports hit with delays and cancellations. The storm battered the upper Midwest states, with extreme wind and snow forcing hundreds of schools to be closed as well.
It started snowing last night. The weather the entire time we were here was rather mild up until today, and big temperature drop, quite a bit of snow, and the roads were a little messy on the way here. We were here in Denver for my husband to interview for a pilot job with a major airline. So I think that's kind of funny that we've experienced these types of delays when that's what he's looking into getting into now as a career.
According to the National Weather Service, wind speeds of up to 97 kilometers along with 60 centimeters of snow are expected to pummel the region for the next 2 days. The storm has also produced a band of freezing rain from central Iowa to Chicago, coating trees and power lines and half a centimeter of ice. The storm also deposited sleet on most roads and highways, creating a dangerous condition for motorists. A 320-kilometer stretch of the Interstate 40 connecting central Arizona to New Mexico has also been shut down. Experts have also forecasted many crucial power lines and substations to be hampered, leading to rolling power outages in the region. Some meteorologists believe that the growing frequency of such storms, along with extreme weather phenomena, are symptomatic of worsening climate change. The United States women's football team here's toy major Lego bringing in a unique inclusivity into its pieces, underscoring a recognition that all beings must be seen as equal. Toy manufacturer Lego has unveiled a new range of figures with physical and mental disabilities, including characters with anxiety, missing limbs, Down syndrome, and even a dog with a wheelchair. The range, called Friends, features what Lego calls diverse cast of characters who are taking on a new challenge in today's modern world. It is the company's attempt to reflect diversity and enable more children to feel represented during play. The new range of toys comes as Lego found in its research that 3/4 of children feel there is not enough toys with characters that represent them. It revealed that 80% of children would like there to be more toys that look like them. The new Lego edition that takes off from the inclusivity theme is seen by many as an extension of Barbie dolls of color and of multiple profession. More toy bands are expected to join the bandwagon ahead. Well, it's Milan's turn to kick off Fashion Week calendar with luxury labels such as Italian fashion house Fendi presenting their autumn-winter women's wear collection. Take a look. Thank you so much for joining us on WION Live broadcast from New York City. I'm Susan Tehrani. I'll see you tomorrow. Same time, same place. Don't go away. More news and headlines coming up next on WION World is One.
There are many other